So in today's video, we're talking about this palette. This is the Ethereal Eyes palette from Makeup by Mario. The minute that I saw this launch, I picked it up. I've been trying it ever since. And I knew I wanted to do a dedicated review on this palette because I am somewhat of a self-proclaimed, emphasis on self-proclaimed, expert, obsessor over wet looking eyeshadows. I'm sure a lot of you guys are already familiar with that and my rants and love for wet looking eyeshadows. But the minute, that I saw this palette launch, the color story sort of row of all these glossy shimmer top coats, I mean, I knew that I had to experience them for myself and kind of give you guys the lowdown. So I'm excited to do that today. Honestly, you guys, I have tried to not look at any of the other reviews surrounding this palette. I have, however, seen that there is a lot of positive hype surrounding it. So that does make me excited to kind of share with you guys my 2 cents. First, let's start off with the fact that Makeup by Mario priced this at about $68. We all know that's expensive, right? But what a missed opportunity to make it $69. I mean, come on. The jokes write themselves, people. No, but really, this is kind of an expensive palette. And by that alone, you do put yourself in a category with these other more expensive palettes. And you open yourself up to a little bit of extra criticism. During the Sephora sale, I picked up the Nouveau palette, I picked up the Rose Metals palette from Anastasia, I picked up the Glam palette from Natasha Denona, I did pick up this palette, obviously. So I've been trying out a lot of luxury palettes over the past week. I really think that that is beautiful context that I'm so grateful to have going into this review. So I have a mouse in my house. I caught it in my office a couple of days ago, and so now every time I hear like a creak or anything, I'm like assuming that the mouse is going to be here and that I'm going to jump up from this chair and just run out of this room screaming. But yeah, getting back to the palette, what has really compelled me about it from the start is this row of really beautiful wet toppers, as well as the overall color story. It definitely leans more cool and neutral. And for someone like me that really loves more cool toned palettes, it just feels like this breath of fresh air to me. This just has incredible versatility to it. And I think it would have been really easy to go like the super gold route with this palette, but I was just so happy to see this more neutral, leaning cool take on a palette like this. I posted about this on my Instagram stories, but the minute that I had this palette, I gave you guys some swatches over there, and I wrote like, I feel like Makeup by Mario and I are like energetically aligned, because when I tell you that I would not change a thing about this color story and the different finishes, I mean, I would not change a thing. It feels like this is my brain in a palette. What a beautiful, that's a beautiful feeling. All right, I'm really hoping it's not in here right now. We're just gonna have to keep going. I really gotta film this video. Okay, but anyway, I really don't wanna draw out this review. I want to kind of be more succinct with it, especially because I feel like you guys just wanna know. Starting off with the positives, I absolutely love the shimmer top coats in this palette. They have just the right amount of base pigment to them, but in general, they are that more translucent base. And if you guys aren't familiar with what I believe to make most wet looking eyeshadow, it is more of that translucent base. The more base pigment that you add, it just starts to take away from the effect of those wet glossy shimmer top coats. And I have actually kind of explained all of my theory and the physics behind wet looking eyeshadows in past videos. I'm not gonna get into that in this video, but the smoother the glitters lie on the lids mixed with that translucent base, you get that more wet looking reflection rather than a metallic reflection. Because when light reflects back off of glitter that is very smooth looking, that's when you get that kind of like mirror glossy like effect. I think that Makeup by Mario has absolutely achieved that with these shimmer top coats. And honestly, I love the different undertones. It makes this palette so versatile. You have 3 of these shimmer top coats that have that more translucent base that has those different base pigments to them. So my favorite is this one right in the middle. So this is my favorite right here. You can see I've actually had quite a dent in it already. It is the one that is all over my lids. The pan looks a little bit more purpley, but really it's just a very light, soft beige with those beautiful silvery wet looking glitters. And it's not a very icy look either. It feels more neutral to me. There is also this one down here that is not as much my favorite just because I'm not like a huge gold person. The glitters do lean more gold, which for me personally, I think that does take away from the wet effect because typically, you know, in everyday life, wet surfaces don't reflect back gold. They reflect back that more light, icy kind of reflection. I mean, think about water, like sun on water, those little twinkling light icy kind of sparkles that naturally happen from more white sunlight. This moves away from that a little bit, but it is nonetheless really pretty. And then I also really love this one right at the top. It is more of like a true champagne, a little bit more on the light side. There's not a doubt in my mind right now. Oh my God. You guys, the mouse is in here right now. Seriously, there's not a doubt in my mind. Oh my gosh, I'm just gonna push through it. I'm gonna push through it. Okay, let's just push through this. The next shadow that I want to talk about is right over here, and it is by far my second favorite. It is a beautiful, beautiful metallic formula, very reminiscent of some of the metallics that you find in the Natasha Denona Glam palette. That's the one that I'm testing out right now, and this is just very reminiscent of that color story. Incredibly smooth, lies really closely on the eyes, and it's just really beautiful. I have no complaints about it, and I like it because, again, it leans a touch more translucent. The base pigment isn't so wham bam in your face, and I think that that is what makes this vision, this palette really unique, is that in order to really get that wet, glossy, smoky, undone kind of look, you need textures like this and finishes like this. That restraint to not make this a really creamy in-your-face metallic actually really helped the entirety of the palette. And then lastly, you have this more metallic over here, a really pretty kind of dark brown chocolate shade. And this definitely has a little bit more of a metallic-y kind of finish to it, but it's way more subdued in a way that just looks really beautiful and flattering on the eyes. And again, that finish really lends itself beautifully to these wet shimmers that you would want to add on top. Because if you think about it, if he's gonna add these overly metallic metallics and then add a bunch of wet looking shimmers, you don't get the full effect of the wet shimmer. It would be overkill in my opinion. But now I feel like we have to talk about the matte shades in here. And this is where this review is going to take a turn. Unfortunately for me, that has been the case. I'm just gonna come out and say it. I don't think that these are super great, in my opinion. The colors are beautiful. The color story is excellent. I really couldn't think of a better color story. But I've just had so many times where I felt like this palette was really leaning on those wet shimmers to make the look extra special. And that is not what I want out of a palette of this price point. The whole purpose of a palette like this, in my opinion, is to be able to get a beautiful everyday look, a beautiful, more smoky, dramatic look. I mean, with these matte shades, this can be an all-in-one palette for literally every occasion. That's why I have been putting so much, like a really, really high expectation on it, especially because it, like I told you guys before, like this felt like something that my mind would always want and would put on paper. But unfortunately, I just don't like the matte shadows. I think that they're a bit chalky. The pigment is not bad, but something about the way they apply on my lids. I do have more dry skin, and I just find that these kinds of mattes just don't work well on my dry skin or like a more dry eyelid. I feel like that could be a different case for those of you with more oily skin, and I would love to hear your thoughts because I do think that this palette has really awesome potential, and I understand why so many people really love it. Hi guys, I'm here editing with the pug painting. I feel like it's notorious, though no one ever actually talks about it. Okay, I felt like I had to very quickly touch on the matte formula and give you guys like a visual representation. By the way, I do have two different eye looks going on my eyes. Okay, anyway, I swatched two mattes from the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes right next to the Natasha Denona Glam palette. And I want you guys to be able to see these swatches next to each other. The Makeup by Mario, I can see every line in my hand kind of peeking through. And you can see with the Natasha Denona, it almost kind of smooths over it, any lines that you have, and looks very smooth and filled in, and those lines aren't as obvious. And I think that that is a really good visual representation of what I've been talking about, how the Makeup by Mario palette in general, the mattes they don't do you any favors as far as texture on the lids. And you can see that at other palettes with a similar price point, those mattes are really going to be way more flattering, especially in my opinion, someone with more dry skin. Okay. Thank you. But let me give you guys kind of like a piece of context here. The Divine Rose palette from Pat McGrath. This is one of my favorite palettes ever. Comparatively to this one from Makeup by Mario, I prefer the entire color story of this palette. I think it's absolutely stunning. Again, this to me, in theory, would be like one of the best palettes I ever used in my life. But you get what you pay for with some of these luxury palettes. These mattes blend so beautifully, and they have really beautiful, rich pigment. And because we're already dealing with a lot of these more translucent, shimmery top coats, when those are mixed with something that feels a bit chalky, I feel like I miss out on the overall definition of the looks that I create. There have been some really nice looks that I've done with this palette, but they have felt a little bit derivative, and that definitely could be on my part. I just want to give you guys another example. This palette, I'm still trying this one out, the Nouveau palette. I want to swatch this shade Fleur for you guys. Immediately when I put my finger into the palette, it's just a different texture than these mattes from Makeup by Mario. And correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like the matte formula from Makeup by Mario has been like, some people have liked it, some people haven't in the past. This is the one from Anastasia, and then this one is from Makeup by Mario. The one from Anastasia just has way more heft to it and pigment that I feel like wants to build on itself. Makeup by Mario pigments, it just feels like they don't want to build on themselves. And the ones from, like, for example, Anastasia, it's like a pleasure to build. They want to build. They're attracted to each other. They want to smoke out. They want, they work with you. And that's what I expect from a palette of this price point. I just have very complex feelings surrounding this palette because when I see this lying just sitting here, and if I were to look at like my palette from Pat McGrath, my eyes lean towards the Makeup by Mario. I will 100% still keep using it because I still have gotten really pretty looks out of it. I mean, this eye look, I think it's really pretty. But here's the thing, do you already have a matte palette with all of your favorite mattes and they all blend really beautifully? All you really need possibly to add to your collection is a wet shimmer top coat. And that is when some of my other videos are really going to come in handy for you guys. There are other formulas out there there are other products that you can incorporate into your matte looks to get that wet effect. And though it would be so convenient to be able to go back and recommend this palette in specific, because the palette is half matte, that just doesn't feel right to me. I say, I mean, this is the old packaging. You guys know how long I've loved this one. Space Cowboy by Urban Decay. It's 20 bucks and I use it nearly once a week, if not more. Or even just go with the Crystal Reflector from Makeup by Mario. I mean, this is a beautiful wet looking eyeshadow that you can incorporate into your other looks. I wish that I was able to recommend this one to you guys. I love all of the metallics in here, the shimmer top coats. Unfortunately, the mattes just, for me, did not perform. I feel like I'm probably gonna get some heat for this one just because it's like, Amanda, it all makes sense. Like, it's all supposed to make sense for you in this palette. Believe me, I know. But unfortunately, I just gotta be real with you guys. I'm certainly going to keep testing it. I'm going to keep trying it. But as of now, you know, as of right now, I just don't feel comfortable being able to recommend it. And I know that you guys have been waiting on a review from me. So hopefully this is helpful. That's where I'm at. But thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Oh my gosh. I hear you, mouse. I can hear you.